Welcome to DevEx Unpacked. I'm Alan Carson, co-founder and chief strategy officer at Cloudsmith. We're solving the challenges of artifact management and are on the path to becoming the software supply chain itself. In this weekly podcast, we share knowledge from Cloudsmith employees, customers, and other great guests from the software industry. Along the way, we'll unpack topics like the cloud, security, supply chains, and of course, the developer experience. Welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here, Ciara. I've been looking forward to this one. It'd be great if you could just give us a quick introduction to yourself.
Yeah, I'm Ciara Carey. I'm a solution engineer in Cloudsmith. So I started in developer relations. Was it 3 or 4 years ago?
It was nearly 4 years ago. It was over 4 years ago, I think.
Oh, no, not over. Not over.
2021, right? It was like,
Eee,
and we're about four. let's call it 4 years ago.
Yeah, that seems fair. Yeah, so 4 years ago I started in developer relations and in a much smaller Cloudsmith with and developer relations was really a hybrid role at the time. Support, we were doing support, sales calls, a bit of developer relations, a bit of like documentation. So a real like classic hybrid startup role. And I loved it. Gave me such a good flavor of what a startup is. I've always worked for those big American companies, and it was it's amazing to work at this near enough to the start of a company. And now I moved into solution engineering about a year ago.
Yeah.
And it's I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, good. Well, tell me a little bit about your background before Cloudsmith. So, you were a developer at one point?
Yeah. So I was a developer. Started in vision system engineering. I have a master's in vision systems, and then I was a developer, and I would own the cameras on a manufacturing line. So you'd own the software and the hardware. It was quite a nice role actually, because you can kind of touch your boat. There's not very many roles where you get to do software and buy a camera and do the whole setup. So it was nice. And then when I was in that company, I moved into, that was Hewlett Packard. I moved into a smaller kind of product role that was just purely software for making it easy to print, which it is so difficult to print from. So we did not solve that problem, but we tried. Yeah. So, and it was, in a way, that was like a little startup, because they felt like they were doing something new in Hewlett Packard, so they kind of had a little startup feel. And then from there I moved to a software engineering role in FireEye, and I was like just working on security products, endpoint security products, and all back-end stuff. And then I took a year out during COVID. And when I came back, I was thinking about going back into software engineering. But I was talking to a recruiter, and I was like, no, I don't really want to be a pure software engineer anymore. I want to expand that role a bit. And I had never heard of a developer relation role. And he was like, oh, you might like this. And then I was talking to you guys, and it really, the product really connected with me, because I had a lot of those problems when I was working as a software engineer. Working with it was like, where is this artifact? Why isn't this working? All that kind of thing, and how it can take hours out of your day, weeks. So I really connected with that. Also, my last role was the first time I really used open source. So when I was a vision system engineer, and even after then, mostly we were using proprietary software. It was like you would pay for a library, and I was only really introduced to the open source role when I moved to that security company. So I was there for a few years, and then so it was a good time to move into Cloudsmith, because I feel like I understood it a little bit more as well.
Yeah, no, amazing. I think like when you come in, like Dan had obviously, and we've already had a chat with Dan. Dan had obviously kind of defined that role as a bit of everything. And it was like, here, can we get somebody else to come in and do a bit of everything? So that you were great when you came in and just rolled up your sleeves and tried to tackle any of the problems that we had or challenges that we had around supporting customers um and getting out there and doing talks and events and all
Yeah,
of
I
that
didn't even
stuff.
mention that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, and Dan has been a great mentor for me as well, and I followed him into solution engineering as well. So if you where to next, Dan?
Yeah. 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 No, well, I really like the I kind of really like the progression of kind of when you came in and and the things that you did, and then you've ended up. It's always been kind of very customer focused and always sort of okay, you're now sort of a pre-sales engineer, a solutions engineer,
Solution,
but
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So and I think though starting in I did an awful lot of support when I started, and I think that gave me a really great grounding. I think it's like, can we get everybody just working to talk to customers for a few weeks? And I remember like I had never really talked to customers before. I was like a back end engineer, and I used to like but I would be like I'd be talking to them over our into our chatbot and it was like took me ages before I pressed the send button. So to break that, like, oh, what if it's not perfect? But so it was great to break in and then ultimately all I do is talk to customers now and show them the product and show them how it can help them solve their problems.
yeah. No, I remember those challenges around support as well. You would always have one window talking to the customer, and then another window talking to like Lee or Dan or whoever could possibly help validate the answer.
And we still continue that today with all our Slack. I mean, I'm constantly talking to product and to engineering just to make sure that I'm solving it correctly and telling them if there's features people have requested and giving that feedback. So I've continued that on that feverish talk to product.
Yeah, I mean, it has become that there's like a fire hose of information from customers, from internal, like that must be kind of hard to kind of pick through to kind of get to the point where you've got the right answer or at least a close approximation.
Yeah, that so yes, that would be a something we work on. So there's some classic answers that we always give that are, and I love it when ding 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 ding, ding, we get those ones, but often it's those left field answers that are like, does it do this in this scenario if I'm wearing a hat and it's a Friday? I'm like, it's like give me a minute and then I'll but usually it's a if it's anything to do with integrating or anything like that, I kind of feel like we can do that if it's like working with another product. Generally that's fine. APIs, webhooks, CLIs, we can get that to work. It's only a matter of time maybe to put the work in to get a little demo going for that. But there's like a lot of there's so many. This feels like an infinite amount of questions that customers can ask.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, no, well, I'm always fascinated because, like, artifact management and software supply chain, it does feel like kind of everybody should be using the same tools and the same systems and the same open source software that's, validated and, and has no CVEs and everything. But like, that's just not the reality. There's like, everybody has a different stack. Everybody's using different tools. It becomes it becomes a sort of infinite matrix of things that we need to support and communicate that we can deal with.
yeah. I think like a lot of the time when a developer is bringing in a new dependency, they're really that's not what they're doing. They're not thinking, oh, I'm bringing in a new dependency. they're thinking, I need to solve this problem that I'm working on. I have few days to get it going, and I want to get it working as fast as possible, and then I can move on to the next thing. So I think their motivation is sort of different. It's not like they're concentrating on completing their task as opposed to bringing in the perfect dependency or something like that. And so that's why that tension is there, where it's like developers want to just get their job done, and then I'm sure the security professionals and their managers as well want to make sure that they're not bringing in new risks into the supply chain.
Yeah. I mean, like I always think, when we sort of started Cloudsmith and we wanted it to be, sort of, by developers for developers, that what we wanted to do was build kind of guardrails, not gates and not blockers, so that you could kind of make it easy for somebody to bring in that dependency, but at the same time, allow the sort of the information to flow to the security teams and understand what dependencies are kind of coming in and everything. How have you sort of seen that play out when you're sort of in, because obviously in your solutions engineering role, you would be talking to different profiles and personas when you're going through that kind of buying process.
Yeah, I remember one of the classic things I always think of is that whenever I'm doing my demo of Enterprise Policy Manager, which would be our guardrails for how you can control and take actions on any dependencies that are coming in or packages. And I always had my demo was like you would have less strict on your development repositories, so you might allow a lot of maybe packages with certain CVEs. You would allow that continue in the development environment and your development repos, and then in the production repos that you would be really strict. You wouldn't allow anything to go on, anything like that. So and then and making sure that you don't have any vulnerabilities in your production repositories. But actually, after talking to customers, a lot of the time it's nearly like the opposite. Well, not really. Everything is so nuanced, but you never want your production build to break. So you don't want to quarantine stuff in production in case it breaks something. But of course, when it first moves into production, you obviously want to make sure that there's no vulnerabilities in your packages. But after that, you don't want to quarantine your production dependencies, because I mean that's your product, that's your business, and the show must go on. So that's one of the things that I picked up from talking to customers.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I mean, that obviously is a very sort of shift left approach, but I have to admit, I think I've also told that story where it's like, oh, let your developers do whatever they want, but tighten it up before it goes to production. But actually, it's tightened up at the start, and and then hope for the best that when you get to production, nothing has crept in, and I guess give warning rather than block the pipeline.
You can say now you could still continue to scan your production repositories and then tag things, and then over time fix stuff as opposed to breaking things and fixing it.
Yeah, yeah.
Which seems faster, but maybe not as not ideal.
Yeah. And sort of enterprise policy management, how has that been going in terms of kind of engagement with new customers? Do they like the flexibility?
Oh, they love it. Especially since we're generally not talking to the devs, we're talking to maybe DevOps engineers, platform engineers. So they love they have a lot of their policy tools might be a lot of click apps, but they love Terraform, they love coding, they love automation. And so when you show them our enterprise policy management, it you write your policies as code in Rego. It's built on Open Policy Agent, And you can define these really nuanced policies that like help you control your packages in your organization. And it can be different for different repositories. You can have exemptions for certain CVEs that you know aren't affected in your code. You can use not only like the CVSS score. So before we have a policy tool for over a year, maybe 2 years, and it was using for on different things, but one of them was that vulnerability management, where you could set the severity level. But now you can set the severity. You can use your policies using the severity level, the CVSS score, the exploitability score, your knowledge of the repositories, your the signing information, the tags that are on the packages, and they can create these nuanced policies that make sense for their organization, the teams they're working with. So they're eating it up. In fact, it was like the first person that tested it was a prospect, and poor product team were like, "No, we
Mm,
want a friendly customer."
yeah. Yeah.
But once you show EPM to people, they wanna use it. Like, so
Yeah.
sorry,
No,
product.
no, yeah, no, that's fantastic. No, it's good to see, and I actually think I'm really proud of the fact that whole feature kind of came out of the hackathon at the offsite. That was kind of the first time, certainly for me, that was the first time it was kind of introduced, and um, it's been a really nice transition to see that actually get built and go out to customers and get good feedback on it.
Yeah, I think it was like in Paddy Carey's our principal, one of the principal engineers in Cloudsmith. I think it was his it came from his hackathon project with his team. So
Yeah.
and he's had a big say in its development as well.
So that seems really powerful in terms of kind of what it can do, but I think the interesting thing is everything kind of around that feature. So what what are typically customers looking for when they implement enterprise policy management?
I think they want to make sure that they can control their open source, that they can block risky packages, that they can and then also have a way for you to monitor maybe packages that you don't want to block, but you want to possibly investigate a little further. And so in Cloudsmith's moment, for enterprise policy management, there's a number of actions that you can take on policies that are triggered. You can tag a package. So you could say, "Oh, good to go," or um, "ready for production," or something like that. Or you can quarantine a package, and so you can say, "Oh, if this policy is triggered, we're going to quarantine it." And a quarantining Cloudsmith means that you can't download the package, you can't be promoted to another repository, you can't deploy it to infrastructure, so it's blocked. And of course, and also there's plans in the future for you to be able to move a package, so you could use that around package promotion. It's where you can automatically, once it passes your policy, that you could promote it to possibly a production repository, something like that.
Right. So it feels like there's like a lot of power and a lot of things that you can do. Is it easy to set up a policy?
Yeah, so so at the start it was all API based. It would be you would have to create your API, you create your policies using API, including then you would maybe you could simulate the policy, so you have APIs around simulating what would happen if I enables this policy, what would be the result. And so that's great, so that you don't turn it on and then block all your packages by mistake. And then we also have another API for decision logs, so you can see it's like complete audit trail of why this package was triggered, why this policy was triggered for this particular package, all the data involved, the Rego, the data that we use for triggering the policies based on that package. and then the results, and then it shows you the actions it took as well. So it's complete audit trail. So that's great for if there's some sort of regulation reason that you want to set up a policy, then you're completely covered there. But recently we have added UI elements to that, and they're coming on more and more. So you can create your Rego in Cloudsmith in the UI, and then you can attach the actions, all that kind of thing, and you can see what's triggered for that policy. And our lovely UI team for EPM are working on creating a templated way of creating the Rego. So you wouldn't even, if you prefer, some people prefer using the kind of building blocks for creating the Rego. So you might say, oh, I want to put in a threshold score. So if the CVSS score is 7 or above, put that into the Rego. And then as well as that, I want to use the exploitability score. I want to scope it to a particular repository. Oh, I want an exemption list. And you can use that using the templated way in the UI itself. So there's work going on for that at the moment. And so it's some people for the UI way, some people for API way. So we cover for both.
Yeah, no, amazing. And and as you're sort of engaging in customer calls and everything, I suppose you don't get you roll off before you kind of get to see the customer actually implement it.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this at the moment. I'd 1 year on, we should do a talk about the most popular Rego policies that people are using. So the really popular one is using CVSS score and EPSS score. That's classic, scoping it to repository. That's always going to be a good one. Another one is licensing. So if you don't want copyleft style licenses, we actually have our classic policy that covers this at the moment. So we don't really talk about it much but you can do this using EPM as well. And then there's other things that you can cover. I'm quite focused on the use case for vulnerability management and headlights, but there are other use cases where EPM could be used for, especially when we get the move action. Using it for package promotion, automatic package promotion would be a really powerful way to use it. I heard Ciara Carey talk about EPM as not being it's not just vulnerability management. It's like Cloudsmith, scriptable Cloudsmith. The power of it is beyond vulnerability management. It's like doing everything you want, doing all your setup using EPM. We're not quite there yet. You can't do all your setup using EPM, but I think that is the focus. The North Star is this is making everything easier to automate, easier to understand, more easier to understand why decisions are made using our auditing. So that is there is a even bigger focus from vulnerability management. But a lot of the use cases currently are around vulnerability management.
So EPM is very powerful in terms of developer experience. Who typically uses it within an organization?
So the security team and the infrastructure team would be using it, would be setting up the policies. They might so they will be creating the policies and setting it all up. And then the developers will be probably the other end of it, where they'll see if any packages are quarantined. That's where they will come in and see it. So they will either, when they're building in their CI/CD, they'll get a 403 when they're trying to use a risky package possibly that's been quarantined. Or they will, if they go into Cloudsmith as well, they will see the UI elements. Maybe they'll get the dashboard for EPM. They'll get the quarantined flag on the package in the repository. So there's different people using it. There's the end user, the developers, and then the people setting it up. And also people who are using, if they're tagging things for for further investigation. Maybe they're tagging something as orange to further investigate. They will be going into the system and checking that out as well.
That's pretty powerful for the security team. And, in the past, I think security has kind of come towards the end of the process in terms of development. And okay, there's been this sort of shift left movement to try and bring sort of more and more security in. But this feels like it's like real control. That's kind of co-owned by both the development teams and security teams.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like a tool. It's sort of like a bridge between security and development. First off, before any of this EPM stuff, I think artifact management is that kind of tool. It's a place where, I mean, over 90% of packages that are in software are open source, and it's very hard to get a handle on what what software is in your product. And before any of this EPM stuff came about, Cloudsmith has been that, using upstreams, bringing in your open source where it's cached and proxied in Cloudsmith. You have one place to see exactly what people are using. And then I think that's the first step of security, is like visibility. Like, where am I? What am I using? That is number one step. And I think EPM, none of that makes sense without artifact management and like being that single source of truth. And I think that's why it's sort of taken off, that EPM thing, why people are they're like, oh yes, it makes sense, it makes sense. But it's because we have that base layer. We already gathered so much information about any packages coming in, scanning for malware, for vulnerabilities, licenses. And that information is like perfectly aligns with Open Policy Agent, where like, great, Open Policy Agent, the engine is amazing. And the Rego to create policies as code is amazing, but it's the data that make it really something, make it something that people are going to use. So we've already have that visibility, and now the controls come along, and you don't have to quarantine packages. You can tag packages, you can do workflows that way. So and because enterprise policy management is quite nuanced, you can have an exemption list for CVEs. You can make sure it's targeted only at certain repositories, certain products. So you're not like, it's not like this big hammer of every CVE higher than 7 is blocked. You can build on that.
Yeah. No, I suppose it's worth saying, because it sort of, in many ways, EPM aligns with Cloudsmith's sort of original premise, which was to, was sort of build with simplicity but be powerful underneath. And it feels like EPM perfectly encapsulates that too, in that you can do really simple things with it, like just block everything with a CVE of 7 and above, or you can get really nuanced and go and and dive a lot deeper into the things the different pieces of information. So that really resonates with me.
So you can say now that it was actually the idea. Sure, Paddy
Oh
had the
yeah,
open
no,
policy.
I'll take credit
Oh,
for
yeah.
for everything. Yeah,
Oh, the
yeah.
seed of
I
that was long, long before.
Yeah, no, I hired Paddy, so that,
Oh.
like, that, there you go. No, Paddy's great. And has brought a lot. I take no credit for anything. So maybe we could talk a little bit more about your pre-sales engineer role now, or solutions engineering role. I keep naming it the wrong thing, but it is essentially pre-sales. It's in that sort of meeting
Yeah.
a prospect and taking them to get to the finish line in terms of becoming a partner with Cloudsmith. So like, how have you found that? Do you get nervous when you do the first call with a customer before you've met them before?
Um, yeah, I've doing it for like nearly a year now. I used to get really nervous. I'd be worried maybe something would happen with the demo, or I'd be asked a question I didn't know the answer to. There's so many questions I don't know the answer to. So I think it's like accepting that as you can always email them afterwards. It's okay. It's not like that was my only opportunity to wow. So I do get nervous before a call, some more than others. So I love showing Cloudsmith, and every week I try to like add a little bit more to my demo. Maybe lately my I've been working on the demo so long and kind of feeling like I know the product really well from 4 years. You don't want to, but it's actually really hard to demo. Like Dan made it look so easy, but it took me a long time to be able to go through the product in a way that made sense, that would really show the power of Cloudsmith. And so I felt like I have I have that down, and my next stage is like maybe to bring more of the customer itself into that demo, and to make sure that we're solving the problems that they're looking to solve. And then I think that's when it really speaks to them, when you can combine the two, knowledge of the product with understanding of why they're looking at Cloudsmith, and that's the sweet spot.
What's the best part of your job?
I think meeting people and helping them, and I'm working with Dan, so I think and it's so great when someone is we're running the POV and they're enjoying using Cloudsmith, and then it's a great buzz when they choose Cloudsmith and you've helped them understand its value. I think that's the best bit when like they go through a POV. The POV is the best bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
the proof of value.
Yeah, no, and the funny thing is, like in the early days, we didn't do any of that. That's the kind of crazy thing, is like it started out as being a self-serve platform. You put your credit card in, you get access to private repositories. There was chat. You could talk to us via chat, but like I don't think we did a customer call for the first couple of years. Maybe we would talk to people if they wanted to, but it was certainly not part of the process. And that has come on leaps and bounds over the last couple of years. How have you found, um, you know, like we've been building that out basically over the last 3 years, I would say. How have you found that kind of transition of like, it just feels very different than what we do now to what we did before?
We didn't have a customer success team, like, as it was 4 years ago. Like, soon after joining, I think the customer success team has been seeing that being built out, and the even within customer success, there's different roles, architecture, there's customer engineering, where they do more of that integration stuff, and the migration tooling, and then the customer success, managers, and how they continue to do it. It's actually funny because I think a big part of the last few years has been me and Dan removing ourselves for like there's for just for me personally, just removing ourselves from the little things we used to do to help people on board. We don't need to do those things anymore. They just sort of work by themselves. They have teams that do all that. Even product, we used to be more involved in product, and now obviously the product team is being built out by Alison and yourself, and it's they're just working really well, and it's you don't need to do that all that work that we used to do. I remember it's very hard to dedicate yourself to say you wanted to have more partnerships. Before having the partnership team, it's so hard to get that going. And now seeing Cloudsmith having all these teams and roles do all that, it just makes everything faster, makes everything just move along faster. And for the sales process, we just we just hand over to customer success. We obviously we stay involved, make sure that handover is successful. We're talking to the customer success people all the time. And we still join some of those calls as well, especially close to the just after they join Cloudsmith.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm curious on that, Ciara. Like, how does when a customer signs up, and you've obviously sort of shepherded them through the process, and then now it's coming to the end, and you have new prospects to go and talk to, and and we have to hand over to our customer success team, who are also lovely people. Like we have done a good job of hiring lovely people all the way through the process so that, our customers feel supported. But how does that transition look from the customer's point of view?
I think we don't want it to look like we're just throwing it over to success. That's not what we're doing. We're handing it over to a team that are going to look after them. And so from a customer point of view, we have a few meetings where we're all on the call. From in the back end, we're creating a document that we share with customer success based on the POV, based on information about the company. And then, at the start, we're constantly talking. And so we have our customer success team. Um, they don't, they're not coming at this blind. They're not like you join a meeting. They would never say, oh, what does your company do? Why do you want to use Cloudsmith? There's a continuity there. And part of that is because the customer success team are lovely to work with. Thanks for hiring nice people. And I think that makes everything a lot easier. So yeah, we just make sure that continuity is kept on.
Yeah. Do you ever miss sort of taking them further into the process?
I what do I miss? Do you know, one thing I miss now, this isn't to do with, it's from developer relations, maybe being able to do a lot of research on like a topic in supply chain security. So I still do a little bit to do with like I'm always reading stuff on supply chain security and trying to bring that back, but to be able to go headlong into something like that, it's that's what I would miss from the developer relations role. But I know I do. It just seems so busy. It's like you don't have a chance to be. It's not like, oh, I want to still talk to that customer because you're moving on to the next thing. You're doing new POV, so you're kept busy. So you don't have time to miss it.
The other thing I'm really curious about was when you were in the DevRel role and you did events and you did a bunch of different talks. Yeah, did you enjoy that? Or was that nerve-wracking as well?
It was quite nerve-wracking. I remember it was probably one of the bigger talks I did for, what was it? Open OS the open source one. It was on securing your it was on, Europe, how is Europe helping secure your open source or something like this. And just before the talk, I had my notes in front of me. I had my presentation, and I heavily used the speaker's notes. And then just before my talk, I was like, I can't see my speaker's notes. How do I? And she just said, I'm so sorry, and then just backed away. So I do remember that. So never rely on your speaker's notes. Yeah.
That's
So
one of
little
those
tip.
that's one of those nightmare scenarios where
Yeah, I think as well, your topic. Generally, your topic, and if you can get to the stage where you can just talk about it, um, that's the place to be. Is like, and I think a lot of people as well, they say the same talks over and over, maybe slightly different. So that really helps as well.
yeah, I have to admit I've never been able to be consistent about like just talking about the same thing over and over
I
and over
haven't
again.
either. That was I think if you do it though, I think it probably gets better and better. Like a stand-up comedian on their 10th go, you're finally funny.
Yeah. Yeah. I know, and I'm always like hanging back as well. I was on a panel at DevOps Live. I think this was last year. It might have been the year before. And they were all like, you can go to the back and get mic'd up and then sort of walk to the stage. So I was kind of like hanging back and I was the last person to get mic'd up. Boy, that was a mistake because everybody else was then in front of me and they just all walked up and started to take the positions away from the speaker, so I ended up in
Course. Of
in the
course.
speaker, right beside the speaker. So
Oh.
all the questions, the first question was like to me, and I was like, I'd thought I'd been like being clever, being at the back and waiting, and then I would be like last yeah. No, it was a nightmare.
Would you prefer talks or panel talks? What would you prefer?
Uh, I think a talk, because you know, you don't really know what they're going to ask you on the
Okay.
on a
They
panel.
always seem
Uh,
like, it'd be nice, it's just like your opinion on things as opposed to, it seems like you don't have to practice as much, but I'm sure maybe you have to practice more because there's a wider scope.
Yeah, I'm always worried I'll get found out, that I don't know everything. But yeah, no, like, well, I mean, panels are good from the point of view that, like, if you don't know the answer, you can kind of like hand it off to somebody else. Uh, but then you're in full control of a talk, so
Mm,
you've only yourself to blame at the end of it if it hasn't gone well, really.
yeah.
But I mean, I used to be petrified about getting on stage. Like, this is maybe 6 or 7 years ago, but like, I mean, I like really, really struggled to do it. And but it's just one of those things. The more you do it, the easier it gets. Even though I still get nervous. I was
Mm.
nervous before we did this. I was scared that you would ask me a really hard question.
It's not how this works. You're the question
But
asker.
this is why I'm host, right? So that but like Allison in the first episode, she basically, like, at the end of it, I was like, "Is there anything else you want to talk about?" And she was like, "I'm going to ask you some questions." So, like, that really backfired.
Actually, yeah, I can ask you a few questions now that you've mentioned it. On enterprise okay, so for enterprise policy management, where do you want to see it go? Like when I talk about that use case of vulnerability management, that seems to be a big focus at the moment. Where do you see it going from there?
It's a good question. I mean, I think we really want to lean into kind of the sort of the automated workflow side of it. I also think we want to be able to basically present customers with, prepackaged, templated things that we have done a good job of, like, this is what works, right? Like, we have a customer base, they have used it in all these interesting ways. You know, this is what boilerplate looks like, and if you just turn this on, you're automatically going to be more secure than you were yesterday. Um, and then obviously they can go in and start to pick up on nuance for their for their business. But I think that's that's the they want observability, they want control, but they also don't want to have to you know spend a huge amount of time trying to create those things. So it's more like, can we use all the data and all the knowledge that we have to make it as easy as possible for people to be secure.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too.
Yeah. Yeah, well, glad we're on the same page.
Yeah.
It's been a bit of a journey over the last couple of years, really leaning into API first and building an entirely new UI on top of everything. How's that transition been?
I know it was probably harder for Dan than it was for me because I hadn't completely fully felt I really owned that demo when it was like a year ago, and I think maybe we launched the UI in like October, November, was it something like that? And so it was like, oh, I can start again, and have the demo for because with all these new APIs we had a new UI based on it, so it was a UI that was really API first. And so I kind of was really I was happy to jump into the new UI, new demo, new workflows, but it was an awful lot of work for our team, especially Dan had like been doing his demo based on the old UI for a long time. And some people like the old UI, which is we were talking to this young guy last week. He was like early 20s or something like that. He was like, "Oh, it's real retro," which I thought was really funny.
Yeah, well, yeah. So I mean, I had a lot to do with that UI when it was sort of initially created, and it was all my thinking that like got poured into it from like between 2000 and 2006. So yeah, it is kind of retro.
Yeah, I
Um,
suppose it
yeah,
is, but I just thought it was like a really funny take on
yeah,
my. We should have like like dark mode, and then
yeah, a
another one would be
retro
like
mode, right?
retro.
Oh, I'm definitely going to open a ticket for that, I think. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, so but I like the new UI. It's really nice to use. Some of the workflows are much nicer in the new UI. I suppose trying to close the gap so you get as much functionality from the old UI that you do in the new UI. That has been a lot of the work the last while. And then trying to convince people to that have been using the old UI that like it to change. That's probably going to take a lot of work. You don't want to learn new things if you already have so much to do and work. It's hard to force people to use the UI, and so by making it just a bit delightful to use, probably is the best way. So to get them to switch over.
yeah. No, my favorite part of the new UI is the fact that you don't have to hit F5 to refresh to find out whether a package has been synced or not.
That that is a little bit delightful.
I mean, like, and it's so funny because that was just one of the things we never got to. It was like, it was one of those like, oh, we'll definitely fix that. We'll do, we'll pull out all the stops and we'll get it fixed, and then it would get bumped for something else that a customer cared about, and it's been that's my favorite thing about the new UI, is making sure that we finally have that seamless update.
I like the organization of some of the admin level settings. I think that it makes more sense, and also adding an upstream is really easy. It's like a little click. So they're probably my two favorite things. And now the dashboards. Do you know what the dashboards are
Yeah.
good?
Well, a
Yeah.
lot of that was, I mean, a lot of that has been of evolution and evolved out of, you know, like the original Cloudsmith built back in the day didn't have any upstreams. So, that was kind of added and bolted on. So it was nice to be able to kind of go back and reintegrate those into the workflow and come up with a
Yeah,
new way
rethink
of
about it. I
working.
suppose
Yeah.
it's something that made sense at the time. Maybe also made sense plus the limiting factors of the technology stack or whatever. And it's probably was nice to relook at it and kind of turn it on its head a bit. What else do I like? Oh, I like the usage page. I think that's really good. And the beamers, having it in the app itself, it's like where any new features that are released to Cloudsmith, you can just click in and see them. And I think I like this for when we're demonstrating, because I feel like it shows how cloud native Cloudsmith is. Because it's like, oh yeah, by the way, we have all these new features, and I click in and I go, and of course, because we're cloud native, you get them straight away. There's no upgrading, none of that. You get access to those features straight away. And then I say, what version of X and Y are you currently on? They're like, oh, it's a really old version.
Yeah.
We didn't get time to update. I'm like, of course you didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a big win for us. Yeah. No, that's
Yeah, that's a good
fantastic.
one.
Well, look, Ciara, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast today. It's been a lot of fun, and I think we've learned a lot about EPM and lots of different things in your world. So thank you very much.
It was great to be here. Thanks, Alan, for having me on.